June 26th, I'd like to call this Board of Selectmen meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, just as a reminder, this meeting is being recorded by TCTV for Channel 8 and for YouTube. Is there anyone else that's recording the meeting for any other purpose? Hearing nothing, we'll move on to our agenda. I'd like to open with public comment at this time. In the future, we'll wind up having a sign-in sheet. That way we've got the registered people who wind up coming in to take their time to come in and actually speak to those present and here at the board. Is there any public comment at this time? Yes? Kate? I say yes to, please come up to the, because if anyone watches, they can't hear it, the microphone.
Well, they can't see me either. I'm having a really bad hair day.
Okay, that's allowed.
Sorry, thank you. Oops.
And anyone that, just remind anyone with public comment, if you can try and keep to a 3-minute, that would be the best in the interest of everybody.
Okay, I'll try to keep it as brief as possible, but I need some clarification. I've been reading the newspaper and things, I don't know if they pop up on Facebook or where, but
Yes, they do.
Lots of things keep popping up, and I just want to know where we are. I know that we didn't pass the override for the schools. I know that we seem to ask for an override for the school almost every year. And I assume the reason is because the school committee approves a budget in excess of the 2.5% that we allowed by the state. It had occurred to me, thinking about it, I wondered if maybe it could be another department, but I realized, no, that wouldn't be wrong, because, I mean, let's say we could pick on the police department, but they're keeping within their 2.5%. But what I'm concerned with is the fact that it seems to pit the town against the school district. And something really needs to be done, because this has been going on for years. I have heard people say, if you have children and you want them educated, pay for it themselves. It's things like that, which are totally inappropriate, of course. And so I'm wondering, what we can do to, is it the school committee? I've also, and I noticed that
Ms. Haley Brooks is at the school committee meeting as our representative this evening. And
Oh,
then Julie
okay.
Richards is absent this
maybe
evening.
I
but
should go over there.
Diane was voted in as our education liaison. That's why she's the best person to be present this evening. She's also been quite outspoken on school issues.
Well, that's another thing, is it says that she's, I think it's suggesting that, that we dissolve the region. Now, by that.
She asked for it to be on the agenda, correct?
Right.
Yeah, for discussion.
So does that mean that she wants to have Phillipson go on their own, and we would go on our own?
I think you could feasibly believe that that is what she meant, but that she didn't desire it. She wanted a conversation about it. That's how I took it.
Okay.
And I told her that I would put it on a future workshop agenda for discussion.
All right. And then the other matter that I was concerned about is that in one of the, again, as I say, townspeople against education in the
Right.
school district, but there's also the COA, which I go to not every single day, but quite often. My computer has been out of whack for quite some time, so I do go over there and use their computer. But I noticed there was talk of having it purely a volunteer agency. Now, I suppose that's possible, but wouldn't it be better, let's say, I go on Friday. There's almost never anyone there on Friday. Couldn't you close down for a day, just as you close down the town hall, just as you I don't know.
Well, the way that you framed it, there's talk of it. The town administrator had come to this board with a list of possible cuts to try and get to a number that was going to be sufficient to what we saw the school district coming back with. Their latest number, the Templeton assessment for their latest number, I believe, is 6.9 million and change. So that leaves still a shortage for us to come up with.
What is the shortage, if I may ask?
It's between, I think it's between 6.5,
It's roughly $500,000.
roughly $500,000 that we in Templeton need to find a path for a solution. So not talk, but suggested cuts as a menu list, not a prescribed action. I'm glad people took note of that, and I'm sure that there was many discussions, both on social media and out of social media. But it did give us a good idea of what possible cuts we may need to consider. That is probably one of the more unpopular ones because of the services that are provided by it. Volunteerism is great, but it's not a lasting methodology, because as soon as you don't have volunteers, then you don't have a service.
And I felt, the people there for the most part, as I say, they help me. I go Thursday afternoon, I play cribbage, I'm a little old lady, it's fun to do. But what I notice is that if you did you have 3 paid people. And I see other people doing lots of work who are not being paid. And we have a lot of people in town who are doing lots of work and not being paid. So there's a part of me that says, why can't we find something for them, when in fact, it sounds like you don't want, there's a consideration, obviously you haven't made a decision, but there's a consideration not to pay anyone, which I don't know, I can't speak for anyone on the staff at the moment, but perhaps they'd have to leave. They're probably dependent on that income.
The last point that you were making was taking a look at town-wide volunteers. I didn't understand.
Well, to run the COA.
Okay.
Rather than, because that was mentioned, and I'm not saying
Yeah.
exactly where I read it, whether it was in the paper or whether it was in somebody's, not blog, I don't read blogs, but somebody's Facebook
Right,
posting
I
or
understand.
something. And, I just wondered if, I'm all for volunteering, but I'm just saying that the 3 people that I believe that, well, there are drivers, I'm not talking about, there are drivers as well.
There's a very good team there. Yeah.
So that, but I wonder that they could continue without compensation. They're probably dependent on that to pay their basic bills.
I would assume so. If someone's drawing a wage right now, no one wants to have that wage pulled out from underneath them.
Right, and.
But I definitely hear your concern about, of the many suggested cuts, or possible or suggested, your concern is the COA. Okay.
And my final point, and then I'll be gone.
Yes, ma'am.
Is on the police department. I read the town report, and I felt that the police report for the year was rather thin on the ground. I'd like to know some details as to criminal activity.
I agree.
Hopefully it'd be nice if there were no
Yep.
criminal activity, but we do have, I think it's 14 or is it 15 members of the police
Yep.
force. And I
I
imagine.
believe it's the second week in the row that the weekly report hasn't had any significant
Yeah.
activity on it. So I agree with you, and I'd like to see some kind of police report, like the Acton publishes, not Acton, Athol publishes their police.
The police
their
logs.
logs. I grew up a town on South Shore of Marshfield. They posted their police logs. It kind of gives you, it's both. It gives you a sense of what is happening within your community. They do a good job of trying to tally statistics as they're required, but I agree with you. I'd like to see something more
And
from
I'm-
Chief Bennett.
I'm going to ask a question, and I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but if we have such limited criminal activity in the town, why do we have so many police officers? Why can't we cut somebody back? And I hate doing that. I know that especially some of their part-time office, sometimes they're working for several towns, patching together a full-time job. And, I know I'm retired, I'm functioning on a little Social Security and a very small pension. And so and I don't have a family, but I realize people with families, but still, it is a place you could cut. And I think
Yeah.
you should consider that.
You're not the first voice that I've heard about the police department's staffing levels. Perhaps at some point, maybe after we've got this immediate kind of crisis, but have Chief Bennett come in and the town report again does a good job. But if the chief came in and perhaps explain his operation, I think people would get a better sense of, from the public safety sector,
Yeah.
why they are staffed the way that they are, and why chief and members of the select board think that they are understaffed.
Oh, dear. Okay,
Yeah.
no, I'd be interested
Yep.
to hear that.
Nope, I've got the note.
Okay, thank you very much. I
Appreciate
think
it.
I'll run over to
Absolutely. Come on.
the other folks. Oops.
You can probably hear me from here. I can be very loud if you like.
It's about, so many of this community relies on rewatching this one, that they just can't make the meetings, and otherwise, thank you for making the meeting. And just, I probably hadn't mentioned it with Kate Upton, but if you just mention your name and the street, your street, not
Yep.
your street address, but the street that you live on.
My name is Julie Kibbe, and I live on Lord Road. I have a child who will be attending the new school in the fall, and I continue to have concerns about the budget and the size of the classrooms. I'm involved with the social media site that has been very negative. Just reading through that, very disrespectful to Chris Casavant and yourself. I've seen some of your comments on there. Really appreciate your feedback.
Yep.
Although in talking with some of the other parents of the same age children that I have, my son will be going into 3rd grade.
Okay.
I'm very concerned that they didn't know what the repercussions would be when it was time to vote for the override. And a lot of us feel like we were blindsided by this. And I know that Chris Casavant offered many different opportunities to learn about what that vote meant, but I don't think that we got the broad range of the parents who are actually going to be hit with this and the additional classroom sizes. Very concerned about that. I have a very bright kid. I've already left a school district because I didn't like it.
Yeah.
We literally sold our house in Barry and moved to Templeton because we were hoping for the best. And I'm, as you can tell, very concerned about this. I'm sure you know the exact social media group that I'm referring to.
I do.
And it's kind of like a good old boy group, which is fine. But I think it is driving a lot of negative energy, and a lot of the parents who are seeing that feel like the entire town is against us and our children.
Right.
And I just wanted to further express how concerned we are.
Yeah. Thank you for your concern, and I believe, addressing a lot of the comments that are online, and every day I see, whether it's a new group, I've got visibility into the Phillipston group as well, just to try and see what the conversation, if people aren't coming in here, because you see in that group, they'll say volunteer, come out to the meetings. They don't, but that doesn't mean that their voices should be, just constrained to that group. What I would like is for people to either communicate respectfully or find out what the information is. I was going to say, I believe the group has somewhere between 300 and 400 members. Is that?
I don't know. I'm not an administrator for the group.
Right,
I'm
but I
just-
believe like when you were in there, you can see how many. And I had made a comment about representation, and just for the purposes of the meeting that we have right now, 800 people voted, approximately 800 people voted against the override. It was 320 for the override. We have 5,214 registered voters within Templeton, of a population of about 8,500. This next census will be pretty interesting. So representative-wise, I don't think we're getting to the level where a group can say the town has spoken. That's what I was concerned with. If the town has spoken and it wasn't coming out just to vote on an issue, if they felt it was their civic duty to come out and vote, no matter what was on the ballot, if it had risen to 2,000, 3,000, and we had some definitive numbers there, I could feel like the town has spoken. But we only had about 1,200 votes, so that's about a fifth of our community, voting community. We only had about a fifth come out to talk about that issue.
I just want to make a point here.
Absolutely.
I've also read that there's been some history here. I have not been privy to that history. I don't know what happened in the past. My concerns are today and the future. So I understand that there have been requests for overrides in the past. Nobody wants to spend extra money on taxes that they don't need to.
Yep.
I don't want to
Yes.
just.
Did you go to the town meeting? Were you present at the town meeting?
I travel for work and I was out of state.
Okay.
So.
That concern was brought up by multiple people at the meeting, that they did not want to be known, and I quote from one of the town member meeting participants, "We don't want to be known as the override community." I listen and I try and remember a lot of these things, and I think that was a sentiment, even though at that meeting, they did vote the school budget in and the operating budget. We just lost at the ballot box. I say lost because I voted in favor of the override, because I'd like to see us not open a brand-new school under a cloud of anger and uncertainty.
Exactly. I think if we're able to cut the budget in other places and trim the fat, I think that's fine. That's great. But
That
we can't
discussion is going
underfund
on
our
right
school.
now. Yes,
You know, you have some very talented teachers in the district, and you can't afford to lose them.
I agree. I have two children in the school district.
And actually, I'm going to leave because I'm headed to the school committee
Okay.
meeting.
Any questions, any comments?
I'll just say a couple quick things.
Sure.
One, this mess, it's not the fault of the school district and it's not the fault of the town. It lies right square at the feet of the state legislature and the governor. They have had adjustments, revisit this law, to redo the formula since I think like 15. Templeton has to pay an extra $700,000 to pay for transportation costs belonging to a regional school district. The state is supposed to pay 100% of that.
So what are we doing to fix that?
So we are paying $700,000 to bus students when we are not supposed to pay that at all. There are a couple of lawsuits going on right now, and I believe that Templeton should get together with some other towns and try a third one, because I think we have the attention of Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. We have the attention of MSBA. We may have the attention of the legislature. Hopefully we will. To perhaps spurn some action on their part to revisit and redo the funding that was created in 1993, and it wasn't worth a damn then, and it's not working today. So regarding the motion or the wish of Selectman Brooks to, look into dissolving the district and stuff, and the state's really not gonna look real good on that from what I've researched so far. But the thing that it will do is, it'll get people talking, it'll get people out, it'll get people involved, and maybe, and I ain't expecting it, this year or, next month or this year, but it's gonna be a process, and maybe we can put some additional heat on it and cause some movement.
So
and-
how
and
do
get
we get
things-
involved, though? That's.
Write a letter.
Can we,
Make a phone call.
so in those groups, who do we write the letter to? Who do we make the phone call to? Let's
Suzanne
put that
Whips.
information on
Yep.
social media and get a frenzy going of parents to try to push that agenda. That I can support. $700,000 is nothing to sneeze at.
No, last year it was like 600 and something thousand. Each
But
year it's just
it's
gonna
still
keep.
not an excuse. We still need to fund the
Right.
school.
And our assessment went up about $200,000 of minimum contribution, because down there in the State House, you built a brand-new school, your property values increased, you can afford to pay more in taxes, so they upped the minimum contribution an extra couple $100,000. That's how this works. I would suggest that if people want to get involved, write get together as a group, write a letter, sign it all, and bring it here, bring it to your Board of Selectmen and say, hey, would you send this to your state senator or state representative? And find out their numbers and addresses and send the same thing. It's everything that we can do to knock on their doors.
Is a petition appropriate in this scenario? You're asking for signatures. Is it a letter or a petition that you're asking for?
Just a letter of concern that express what you just told us and address it to them and have people sign it and bring it to your Board of Selectmen and say, hey, would you please forward this on? I just, whatever you feel you can do. And if you want, you can find out your senators or representatives' phone numbers,
and Debbie and
addresses,
Suzanne
the State
Morris.
House, and mail letters. Get 50 people together and send them, hey, like I said, I don't
They have
expect them to
Facebook
move.
pages, by the way. I know that we're talking a lot about
fast,
social media,
but-
but they try and, I'm sorry, Jeff.
That's all right. No,
They
that's
they
all I
do
have.
use that platform to communicate. I've spoken with them through that platform many times, and they're quite responsive. But thank you. We've got all your concerns, and I'm sure you're not the only one.
Can I?
Yep, please, I'm sorry.
So I do agree with Jeff that we need to hold the state accountable, and there was talk at the last meeting to do a class action lawsuit like Orange and a few other towns. My position on the school was, at first, was we voted it in, let's finish what we started. But I think on May 20th, if there were a lot of people sleeping that day that didn't get out to vote, the voters spoke on May 20th. I don't want to change my position, and I'm new to this process, the political process, but that vote should count for something. If people were sleeping that day, shame on them.
I agree with that to a certain point, because I think some of this negative and some of those no votes for the override were created from the social media frenzy that happened specifically in Facebook. And I will call it out. I'm a very disrespectful group, and I am part of it. I will probably get booted from that group after my comments tonight.
I don't think so.
However, I think that, when a group of people get together and rally, just like Jeff was asking about for the letters, things happen. And it takes one person to start a rally. And I would like to start that. I'm volunteering. I offered the school committee to stand with a sign or a pitchfork, whatever it took. So I am going to get going, though,
All
because I
right,
want to
thank you,
make it
Julie.
to the meeting.
I
And
appreciate it.
lastly, from what I understand, that's how we got into this situation. 2 noes turned into a yes, so that's to my knowledge, and I'm new at this. I'm brand new to the board and brand new to town politics. And again,
Thank you.
2 noes don't equal a yes.
Thank you, Julie. Any other public comment? We have a read file for the select board where we occasionally will get letters from the community. I want to at least acknowledge them at this point through the public comment portion of the agenda. Mr. Joe DiMucci of South Road, we got your letter. We know that you're ready to help out Bob Sozik in fixing the roads. Thank you very much.
We'll put his name on a sign.
Yep. We received a letter from Peter Haley of Stonebridge Road. Peter, we did receive your is Peter here tonight? No. We did receive your letter about moving the Stonebridge project forward and preserving any historical quality for it, so thank you for your letter. We also received a letter that was written to Board of Selectmen for Phillipston and Templeton and the school committee from Tanya Quinn, concerns, much like Julie just had, about class sizes and commuting. Mrs. Quinn, we did receive your letter. And lastly, we also received an email forwarded to us from our clerk, thank you, Holly, from Kaylin Carpenter of Gray Road. Same concerns as Julie and Mrs. Quinn about class sizes, and she starts out, it's great concern that I draft this letter to you. Every single one of them starts that way, so I think there's a lot of passion around this, and there should be. But I just wanted to acknowledge that we are taking a look at basically all of the communications that the board gets, and we consider everything. So, if there is no further public comment, I'd like to move into agenda item 4, meeting minutes of our June 12th meeting. I'll entertain a motion to admit the minutes for the regular session of this board on June 12th as presented.
I move to approve the minutes of the regular session of June 12th as presented.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? And these minutes, those minutes reflect all of the special appointments to open space, recreation. I think I saw something in the weekly report. It's determined that it's the Recreation Commission.
Yes.
Okay. And the minutes were corrected for that. Building Committee. Any further discussion? Hearing nothing. On the motion to approve the minutes of June 12th, how do you vote, Jeff?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Moving into the executive session minutes that were for the 8th of May, that was tabled from our last meeting.
I move to table them again because Jeff and I both abstained and our senior
We'll just table again until we have Julie.
selectmen are not here.
Yep, I understand. Okay, minutes done. Mr. Terenzini, any new employees?
Not this evening, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. At this time, I'd like to call the sewer commission members forward, whether you can get around the table or, but.
Can't hear you.
Oh, you can. Oh, with that phone?
And this will be the joint meeting between the sewer commission and the Board of Selectmen on the failure to elect an appointment.
It wasn't our failure.
We didn't vote one, it wasn't a failure, we just didn't get one. Quorum achieved?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You're calling to order the sewer commission?
Oh, is that what we're gonna, is that how
Yes,
that's?
you call your, it's a joint meeting, so you call to order yours as well.
Okay, we'll call to order our sewer
Right.
meeting at
Second.
7 o'clock. Second it, okay.
Great.
For a second. All right, what we're here for, what you don't know anyway, is to appoint another member. So we have a full board.
Excellent.
And we have Tom Hurd.
Yes.
He's accepted to take that position. And we've both agreed that he'd be a good fit for he's a Templeton resident, and he has sewer at his house, so they can't say that because me and Tom don't have sewer, we don't
Okay.
have feelings for people with sewer, so.
Right.
So we got Tom.
Do we need to vote on the appointment?
Yes.
Make a
We do.
Okay.
Make a motion, we vote Tom Hurd as the third sewer commissioner?
All right, second it.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The board needs to vote. It takes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It takes 3 votes between your collective bodies.
Okay,
To
but they
complete the
take the vote, or
appointment.
do we?
Essentially, it's one, you need to think
It's
of
a
it
joint
as one
session, so.
Yeah.
single body. So it takes
Okay.
3 out of the 5 of you for the appointment.
Okay,
Okay.
I vote for Tom.
That's it.
Yes.
That's it.
HURD.
Yes. He got all 5.
It's unanimous.
And that would be,
Unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, that would be through the date of the town election of May of 2020. And then he would run for the 2 years that remain on the 3-year term.
Okay, so it finishes out this fiscal year.
Right. The appointment is through the next election, and then
Yep.
he runs for the balance of the unexpired term.
All right. That's it? Oh, this is easy.
You okay, Tom?
No, say that again,
No.
please.
When somebody is not elected to a full 3-year term,
Okay,
the 2 bodies, the body they weren't elected to and the select board, meet jointly the way you have.
yeah,
The person is appointed until the next election, and then there's 2 years left on the term, and then Mr. Hurd would have to run for the 2 years
2
that
years, okay.
remain. Then you're back on cycle.
Okay. Get it? So
I got it the first time.
So next year.
And
While you're in session, do you want to
Yeah.
talk about
He's
anything?
your appointee, Tom.
So you're gonna get.
Yeah, and
selection,
while
you're
we're
gonna
here-
25 signatures on your nomination.
Yeah, Mark,
paper.
Yeah,
absolutely.
and while we're here, does anybody have any questions for the sewer department?
So Kent retired.
Yes.
And you're kind of pulling double, I know that we approved a carryover for leave, because right now you're operating, are you gonna find another, or?
Well, it's out there.
Okay,
I've spoken with a few, they're kind of comfortable at their jobs, where they're at.
Yeah.
Some are not, didn't say yes, some didn't say no. They still got it up in the air.
yep,
Our assistant chief, we're okay under the law right now. We have a assistant chief operator, well, he's like, not the chief operator now, but we're covered.
yep,
He doesn't want the chief job with the superintendent. He doesn't like the political part. You know, he just doesn't, he wants to be an operator, but not doing all the work that we do.
right,
you
right,
know. The only other way would be to appoint him chief, try to get someone for assistant chief, and us as commissioners take on a bigger role into the political part of it. The budgets, I mean, right now, that's what we're doing. Anything the signatory for superintendent, I've been doing it because I'm the chairman.
yep,
Making decisions day to day. The guys call me, ask me questions, ask Tom. Tom does the IT stuff. I do more of the workings of the plant. Do we do this, do that? Would this be the best way? And we've been running it that way as like the superintendent would.
yeah,
So we're still up in the air of how to reconfigure this together, because the market for a chief operator is getting smaller and smaller, and because they're retiring, they're getting older and retiring.
right.
There's a lot of new guys, not a lot of new guys coming up in the field. They've
Yeah.
all gone
A
into,
lot of appreciation
they've
for
gone
it,
into the
yeah.
computer field, haven't gone into all sorts of IT stuff, but not into this type of work, into
Yeah.
water industry. And it's not just wastewater, it's the clean water industry. Everybody is tight. There are a couple of towns now that have no operators at all. And Kent right now, since he retired, Royalston had no operator at all. So he's going there 2 hours a day. He's on like not really per diem, but kind of a little contract. He goes
yeah.
2 hours a day, he doesn't do anything with running the place. There's highway department does that or something, but he just goes in, does it, so it's covered, for Royalston's covered. I mean, just 2 hours a day, and so, I mean, that's how bad, I mean, it's tough.
Excuse me, gentlemen, and I ran into Kent, and he
Yeah.
said you can be fined, a town can be fined.
Oh, yeah,
Up to $10,000 a day?
Yeah, but we have an assistant chief. So
Okay.
we do have a grade 7 person. We're all set under the law.
Okay.
So,
They want you to have 2, they always want to have a backup. But there are some towns with none. They don't have a chief or an assistant chief. They just have some operators, and the state knows it. And so,
so
What do we do?
So what we're thinking of is if we can possibly, in the interim, if we don't get a superintendent right away, make Jeff
like I said, yeah,
the chief, officially a chief operator, would have to come up with another salary range and get somebody as assistant chief, and we would continue doing the superintendent's job the way we're doing now.
and it'd be a lot more hours. I mean, compensation-wise, we'd have to worry about that after, but what we're trying to do is get a chief and a superintendent, like I said. And if you have to pay somebody, say, $80,000, $75,000, $80,000, $90,000, whatever. But if you can't get one to do both, you have to get a chief, you gotta give him $50,000, superintendent, you gotta give him $50,000, and now you're up to $100,000.
Right.
You know, and it's tough. We're okay right now.
Okay.
I mean,
Tell my daughter to go into wastewater management.
any of the water, the wastewater or the clean water. The water is,
Sounds like
either one of those two is a very.
Water filtration, my
Water
son
filtration,
hurry up, we have a
travels all
job
over the
open.
world.
She's 14, and
Yeah.
I think she's gonna go to school
But,
first.
staffing wise, the rest of it's fine. We just got we got a laborer. Sorry, Bob. We got one of his seasonal guys, he's doing full-time, sorry. Because we have some, we just needed a laborer, but
Yep.
staffing-wise, we're all set at the moment, and
Good.
Is there anything that we can do for you?
find us a
Fine,
chief.
that's a chief.
All right, I'll think of that, yeah.
Yeah.
Carter's been helping us spread the word and publish it in different places, but
And me being at all the different wastewater treatment plants all the time, and I ask them all, and they're all in the same boat. You know, they don't, they're either stuck there, or they're looking for assistance or chiefs also. Any other questions, anybody? Okay,
I don't.
all right,
So, you'll adjourn.
make a motion, we adjourn this meeting, joint meeting?
second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, unanimous.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right.
I'd like to call up the Community Preservation Commission for a joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen.
Everybody, gotta
That's
get on
everybody.
TV.
Carter,
Thank you, Ida.
I want to move the, that's for you. The hearing up onto the agenda. Yeah.
I mean, as long as your board
Yeah,
agrees,
that's
you
fine.
can move anything.
I think they probably will. Okay, you just call your.
Okay, so I'd like to call this meeting of the Community Preservation Committee to order.
Aye.
Hi.
Okay, we are meeting in joint session this evening on your non-elect. The last commission said they didn't like the word failure, but failure to elect an appointment. Do you have a candidate?
We do. Now, one thing I would like to point out that I believe because of the, dearth of candidates that we saw at the election, there
Right.
must have been significant confusion about the process of what it takes to write someone in, because I had spoken to several people who had indicated they had voted, and I had heard anecdotally elsewhere that, and those ballots were not counted, and it could be they didn't fill out the little circle, or they didn't need to have the address. So I would just ask that perhaps more communication be provided to the voters so that if there is a write-in, that people know the process.
Okay.
So
So that's a conversation with our clerk.
yeah, and it must have been a horror show this year with all the empty, the people weren't running, and, so.
I was beat by someone named Blank, so they have yet to come forward. It was I think that the election, I think, was overtaken by the override, but if there's confusion, I certainly, when you say, I forget how you put it, but if there was confusion and then ballots weren't counted, if that's a concern, if someone might say that I want to make sure that we're erasing any doubt on whether it's write-ins or voting process or otherwise. Jeff, did you have something? I thought I heard it.
No.
Okay.
Because you know how you have to fill in the little dots. If you write somebody's name in, the computer might not see that the little box was filled, so it's
Okay.
operator error. So I'm
Yeah.
not saying there's a problem with the election, but problem with the
I can't even think
uncertainty.
of what the procedure is off the top of my head, dot and the write-in. It's not just a write-in, right? Okay.
And we don't know, we've heard sometimes you gotta have an address, sometimes not.
Okay,
So if there was signage or something.
okay,
Just,
we'll address that,
Yeah, my vote was not counted.
but you're here this evening, and that's great.
yeah,
Your
so.
first name is Joanne.
Joel.
Joy.
Huh?
She is
Joy.
Joy.
Joy, okay.
Painter from the Recreation Committee. Brad Leighton represents the
Okay.
assessors. Our candidate, Joanne Burden, has a class. She could not attend tonight, but she has submitted a letter of interest. I'm
Yep.
John Henshaw, the chairperson. Dennis Rich is a representative from the planning board. I'm an at-large member. We have 3 at-large members that are voted in, and Ida Bean represents the Housing Authority.
Okay.
So it's a 9-person board, 6 of whom are appointed by their respective boards as named in the bylaw. So that is the assessors, the recreation, the planning, the housing authority, conservation, which is George Andrews, historical commission, which
Yep,
is
I know
Darlene
George.
Leclerc.
Wow.
And that's probably it, right?
Yes.
So community preservation is 9 boards collective.
Nine-member boards,
Nine-member
and
board
has
collective.
6 boards represented and 3 at-large elected positions. So the elected position is the one that's in question, and we had a failure to elect.
We also had other people express some interest. We have met and we have spoken about this, and have a candidate who has submitted a letter.
Okay.
And so.
Yeah, I mean, I have Joanne's community interest form.
Okay.
It's a bit light. I can't make out a whole lot, but Joanne is who you're here about this evening.
Yes.
Okay.
And Joanne has a long history in the town working for conservation and serves on the Mills River Watershed Council with me, so I'm very familiar with her. And so I guess we would entertain a motion to nominate her. Is that what we do?
Yeah, I mean, we'll vote along with you, but I would expect that the motion and the second coming from your body.
Okay. We have a motion to,
I'll make a motion that we select Joanne Burden as to fill the vacant position.
motion made by Dennis Reg, seconded by Ida Bean for Joanne Burden.
Through May of 2020.
Yeah, we understand that that would be the one-year deal, just like you
Yep.
explained.
Finishing out the current fiscal year, yeah. Okay. Discussion?
Any discussion here? Okay, so now we pull our board, or,
Yeah, probably it's a roll call vote.
It's this body's convention to do everything
Yeah.
by roll call.
Yep.
okay, so Ida?
Yes.
Dennis?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
I vote yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well.
Thank you.
Great.
Is there anything that this board, any questions or issues or things for the Community Preservation Committee to discuss?
I didn't have anything. Terry?
I
or-
did, but
Is there a difference between the Community Preservation Committee and the Open Space
Yes.
Yes.
Commission and Recreation?
So the Recreation Committee is one body, the Open Space Committee is another, and then the Community Preservation Committee is the third. The Community Preservation Committee is charged with working with the townspeople to move projects forward to be placed on the town meeting warrant by the Select Board that satisfy the requirements of community preservation funding, which are in support of community housing, open space, recreation, and historic preservation. So it has its own budget, separate from the town's budget. It is funded by a surcharge on property tax that is equal to 3% of the property tax people pay. So if you had a $100 tax bill, you would pay an additional $3 towards the community preservation, with the caveat that the first $100,000 of value of your property is excluded from that. So if your property was assessed at $100,000 or less, you would have no CPA surcharge. You'll see that on your tax bill as a separate item. And then annually, the state provides a match to the communities that is based on how much the town raises. It comes from feeds that are recorded through deed transactions, and the legislature is talking about increasing that surcharge as communities have increased in number. That fund has been depleted. Towns that have a surcharge of 3% are eligible for additional rounds of funding. This is the case for Templeton, so we have always, just until about 2 years ago, we were always getting a 100% match. We are now, and right now, there's a few towns that still do that are smaller than us, like Royalston and Phillipston. And so we were at 88% last year. So just as an indication, the estimated budget is between $200,000 and $300,000 per year comes to the town. So that's a little snapshot.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
I've got
Okay.
nothing further if you want to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much.
Hey, Jeff.
Appreciate it. Jeff, Terry, do you have any concerns if we move the poll hearing up?
No,
No,
Okay.
no.
we need a,
Tom? You want to do the poll hearing now? You want to do the poll hearing now? Okay. Come on up.
excuse me.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I would ask your indulgence in having Bob come up as well.
Yes.
Because he went out, he viewed the trees, he spoke with the property person, and he has some comments.
I'll view
for
him
you.
as a witness with the petitioner.
Sure.
Okay.
What,
Say again?
I was just wondering, I didn't hear what you said.
So I'd like to call a utility pole hearing at 7:17 this evening. We have the petitioner present with a witness. I don't see any of the contra votes that we had before, but I'd like to call this hearing into order. Just as a course of procedure, I'll allow the petitioner to first speak. If you have any witnesses to explain, you can do that right after. If there's any opposing view or otherwise, we'll hear that. We'll have any further questions from the board at that point. I'll then ask for your recommendation. Based on that, I will then come out of the hearing, and then we can have our deliberations after the hearing is closed. Everyone's clear? Okay. Tom, go ahead.
Okay. Tom Berry, Electric Superintendent of the Municipal Light Department. So a couple of weeks ago, we had a public hearing to place 3 poles in the town right away on Cook Road. A resident came to the hearing, had concerns that the person that is asking us to place the poles had dropped some trees onto his land and didn't clean it up to his satisfaction. So we continued the hearing till tonight. Myself and the DPW Director, Bob Solzik, went out and looked at it, and we met with Mr. Dwelly, and
Yep.
Bob also met with Mr. Beliveau, who wants to build this house that requires the poles. So I think we came to some type of a resolution that it will get cleaned up. I can let Bob speak to that.
Bob, if you're able to come up to the microphone.
Bob Sozak, Templeton DPW.
How are you?
Mr. Chairman, as Tom mentioned earlier, we met out there and talked with Mr. Jack Dwelly. I guess this incident happened back in 17 in August.
Yep.
Mr. Beliveau did cut 2 trees on the side where the power lines are, and those trees were town trees. So me and Tom talked to Jack and asked him what he'd like us, to do to consider.
Right.
There is a lot of brush and stuff on top of the wall, and a couple of spots of walls, the rocks blew out. And I told him I would type a memo to Mr. Carter, and I would talk to Mr. Beliveau. So I took all that information from Jack, and then I reached out to Mr. Beliveau. He met me out there. I explained to him that he cut 2 town trees illegally. He should have called at the time the tree warden or the superintendent of the highway. Explained to him you can't just go cut trees, you need to notify the town. Because
Exactly.
if it is a rotted tree, we do a hearing and do it the legal way. So I explained to Mr. Beliveau that his neighbor, Mr. Dwelly, would like his wall cleaned up and repaired, and he agreed to do that cleanup along with making restitution to the 2 town trees. One, if I was in a position at the time, I would have had him remove it for a line of sight for one driveway at 129, and I asked him to plant a tree in place of the other one, but I'm gonna approach him and see if he's willing to make a donation, and we can use it on Arbor Day at Templeton Center or something.
Okay.
But he was very cooperative.
Mr. Beliveau, yeah.
Yes, and I told him I'm gonna follow through with this, and I gave him 2 weeks to clean up Mr. Dwelly's property, and he was supposedly starting just the other day, so I'm pretty confident there's gonna come out of this okay.
Yeah.
And I will stay following up with Mr. Beliveau.
Okay. That's what I understood, yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
satisfactory. That's good work.
Is there any other questions?
No, I went down and I looked at it and I saw what, I couldn't tell, you know, who cut the tree or when, but I saw the trees on the wall and the damage, and Jack Dwelly had mentioned something about, he'd gone to the conservation. I went through the conservation commission minutes from January 2016 to present, and I couldn't find nothing in there, referencing it, but, you know, Bob and Tom spoke to him, and the situation, because Mr. Dwelly didn't seem like he was looking for a lot, he just wanted
he just.
basic stuff done, and if that's all said, then
So we avoided
fine.
calling the tree warden?
Yeah, and I explained the, you know, how to do it correctly, and if he has any questions whatsoever to call, you know, get him the answers, or I'll give him the answers.
And I believe it was Robert May, I think it was, sent an email about Massachusetts General Law 87 about trees and tree wardens, so that, I appreciate that. I just wanted to say thanks for that.
Yep,
That
but
was
Mr. May
interesting.
is not he's not a witness during this
No.
this hearing. Yeah,
No.
yep.
But it was handled well.
so, good work on both of you, thank you for
Thank you.
just straightening it, just a little talk, straighten it out.
Great.
Okay, thank you for the testimony. Is there any other questions, comments, or contributions for the hearing?
I believe this matter, I shouldn't be holding up the light department to proceed with the.
Yep.
I will follow through and,
It does
think
appear
the matter
that
will
way,
be
yep.
taken care of.
And Tom, just your final, your recommendation?
Yeah, I'm satisfied, like Bob said, it seems like a closed matter, and
Okay. And your recommendation is to proceed with those actions?
forward with, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And it's three polls?
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
3 poles and an anchor.
Okay, thank you for your recommendation. I'd like to close the hearing on the Cook Road, the hearing for the Cook Road pole placement. And we're out of hearing at 7:20. I move to grant permission to the Templeton Municipal Light Plant to install 3 40-foot utility poles and 1 anchor on Cook Road as shown in the attached drawing.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and I have a second. Is there any further discussion? I think that the proposed, the recommended course of action by Tom is definitely satisfactory. I know that there were, you know, they brought up issues, if there was communication errors that caused it to take this long, and for Mr. Dwelly to finally come forward to say, I have some issues with, you know, adjacent landowners. I think that's good. So I like the way that it happened, that we gathered the information. I definitely thank you guys for going out to do that, and that we were able to, it was a win-win situation, so I think that was good.
Can I ask a quick question? Did you talk to Mr. Dwelly?
Hmm?
And he's okay?
Yeah, that was in the beginning of.
Okay,
yep.
sorry.
Yep.
I mis- all right. That's good.
Okay, on the motion to grant permission for the 3 utility poles to Templeton Municipal Light Plant, how do you vote? Jeff?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Thank you.
Thank you for your patience, Tom.
Okay, we're gonna go back into our normal agenda. Next up, we've got annual committee appointments and vacancies. Mr. Terenzini?
We did have a response between writing everything up and this evening. Kathleen King currently serves on the Council on Aging. The 3-year term would end on 6/30/2022, and she has indicated an interest in serving an upcoming term.
Okay.
Those are the only statements of interest
Okay.
that we have since the last writing to you.
So do you need, can we do that appointment this evening?
Yep.
It's 3-year? Oh, thank you.
And we'll continue to reach out and make sure you're aware of vacancies, because at this point, it would be, I think, a matter of recruiting, and then the board nominating people. I don't anticipate we'll have many more, or any more responses for
Yeah, this is a reappointment.
It
Yep.
is.
Okay. I move to, did you have some? Okay. I move to reappoint Kathleen King to the Council on Aging for a 3-year term ending June 30th of 2022.
Second.
On a motion that duly made and seconded, any discussion? Hearing no discussion on the motion to reappoint Mrs. King to the Council on Aging for a 3-year term, how do you vote, Jeff?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Great. Thank you. Okay, next item is the proposed sale of surplus items. We're on agenda item 5E or 5 Echo. Mr. Terenzini.
So we sent out a notice to all town departments asking them to collect and notify us of items, whether they're vehicles, pieces of equipment, office furniture, or the like. We had almost 40-some items that were put together for sale. We advertised those for roughly a month, both locally on our website, the state central register, all the kinds of publications we use all the time. In addition, we mailed the notice out to, I think, 9, if I remember, parties that we'd identified might be in this kind of market. We also held an open house on a Saturday. It does cost some OT, but I've had regular citizens who have to work during the day in other locations complain that if we do it on a weekday, they don't get a chance to things. So we had a 3-hour open session in which anyone could come in and look. Of the 40 items offered for sale, only 3 didn't draw a bid. It's about $15,000 in change. And at this point, we're requesting that you authorize, and we've prepared a draft motion for you, the sale of all the items that were bid upon to the high bidder, except the town of Phillipston. They did put down a bid deposit. You may recall Stonebridge Road was closed. They took on additional plowing for us and have indicated they would keep doing that. So as a gesture of good neighbor, we'd like to just give them the piece of equipment for just the balance that they put down, the bid deposit that they put down. And then, as you'll see in the motion, if somebody doesn't complete the sale and there's somebody below that, we would just move down until we try to complete this as possible. We do have 2 items, 39 and 40, that were some sanders. They're really only worth scrap metal at this point. We would dispose of them.
My list does not have a 39 or 40.
Those 2 had not made the auction list at the end.
Okay.
So happy to answer any questions, but I think it was pretty successful. This follows on one we did about 2 years ago.
I remember.
I'd like to get on a cycle where we're bidding our equipment, if we're able to keep buying equipment, and getting a trade-in at the same time that we're opening these bids.
Yeah.
We're not there yet, and then you take whichever one's the better offer. But this will really clean the yard out as well. Just as a reminder, one item came from a drug seizure fund. So when that is sold, the monies have to go back to that drug
I understand.
program. But it's still about $11,000 for the town.
Is that item 14?
The Mazda?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's amazing how I can pick that right out.
Impressive.
It's a pretty lockstep that we use. Everything's exposed to the public.
I move to declare all of the items offered for sale, excepting items 21 and 38 as surplus, and to dispose of items 39 and 40 as scrap metal through the Board of Health Recycling Program, that the proceeds might help support that ongoing effort. I further move that the remaining items be sold to the highest bidder willing to complete each purchase on each item, and further, to authorize the town administrator to sign the various titles and bills of sale.
So moved.
Do I have a second? Well, you seconded.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Just for the benefit of those who are watching at home, I'm gonna, if they had not seen the list, but the list that we are looking at, up to 40 items, like the item that would be basically handed over to the town of Phillipston is a 1975 catch basin truck. Other items of note is various pieces of computer equipment, all declared surplus. A 1946 six-wheeler International, Ford Explorers. We did take a look at reuse. These are items that should be declared surplus.
They've all were inspected for any possibility of repair.
Right.
Before they were redlined. The fire chief's vehicle we'd hoped to reuse. Once we finally got it up on the lift and really poured over it, we found pretty severe cracked frame. So they've
Now, is
really
this
given you their full measure of
Right.
life, I think.
So they were able to walk around, kick the tires. This is caveat emptor. Okay.
And that's, the bill of sale says that specifically as
Excellent.
well. Everything is sold as is, whereas with no implied or stated
Yep.
warranty.
And there's no restriction on town employees participating in this, because I noticed that
not when we-
Mr.
not when we-
Skozak looks
yep.
like he's getting a lawnmower.
Actually, he's not. He got outbid.
Oh, he got that.
And that's one of the reasons that we're very careful. And if something doesn't get a bid, it doesn't go to an employee, it
Yeah.
gets scrapped or sold again. We want to try to be very transparent and lockstep
Okay.
about how we dispose of
Back to eBay, Bob.
this.
Again, 1975 Shetty, 1996 Eglin H12 Pelican sweeper. There's a push-behind sweeper, various items of furniture, drag box, U-Haul trailer, Fisher 9-foot plow with the storm guard, Davy 315 old air compressor. So again, a great job basically cleaning out the shed. Any further discussion? The complete list, I believe, is available online.
It's online,
Yep.
yep.
If anyone's looking for any details on that. If
It was
there's no
posted, I think, within a day of the bids being opened.
Okay. But the same list, I think, is with this meeting's minutes. Any further discussion? On the motion to authorize the town administrator to declare surplus and authorize the town administrator to execute the bills of sale, how do you vote, Jeff?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Thank you, great work, Carter. And your team. Okay, next item is 5F. Mr. Terenzini, we received your memorandum on the NRSD and school committee status about their budget and our general fund budget, as well as the suggested warrants for the late July town meeting. Do you have any further report?
Just to let you know that we did yesterday, late, after receipt of a letter from the school, let me back up if I might, we sent just a simple letter pointing out what we saw as a failure to post the June 4th meeting in compliance with statute. We received a letter back from the chair of the committee that stated they felt they had complied. So we did file a formal complaint late yesterday afternoon. Technically, they have 14 days to respond. We'll obviously hope that they do it more quickly. And I've asked council to explore filing that simultaneously with the Secretary of State's office. So our hope that it would be revoted, reset the time clock, and give us all a little more time to work on this has not come to fruition as we had hoped. So we do need to call a special town meeting. The statute requires that we hold it within 45 days. Doesn't require we complete it, but it does require we hold it. So what town council is advising at this point is that we would vote a warrant, you would vote a warrant. We would hold it as long as we can. Probably Monday is gonna be our drop dead. So that if something does happen, we just wouldn't release the warrant.
Right.
If nothing happens, then we would release the warrant. We would go to town meeting. We're suggesting July 18th, because it gives us the most amount of time possible. Between now and then, should they recertify the budget, or should the Secretary of State's office uphold your appeal, we would start the town meeting and then adjourn it until a date certain, which we would pick at that time. I will tell you, the moderator will not be available on July 18th. That is one of the problems. So the first order of the meeting will be to elect a moderator there that evening. It's a 2-article warrant. The first article is to vote upon the request of the school district. It is our obligation to put before the voters their request, which is $6,978,408. If that passes as it is, then that's it. If it does not pass as presented, if it's amended down, then there's a series of things that could happen. Let's just say it passes as is, then we're done and the town has to cut its budget. If it passes as a lower amount, the school district could certify a budget that meets that amount, and then we're done. Or it could hold a district meeting at which both towns get together as a single body, as you did with the Sewer Commission and the CPC tonight, and everybody has one vote, and it's the budget that passes. By requesting a warrant amount to appropriate a sum of money or such lesser amount as the district may subsequently certify, means we don't, that's it, we're done. We accept that number. So the second piece becomes, well, when do we cut the town budget? How do we cut the town budget? How do we know how much to cut the town budget? Suggestion of council and I, please remember that every town meeting is gonna cost you something on the order of $2,000. You have to advertise it. The advisory committee has to have a pre-town meeting. Council comes out. You have to pay your checkers to check everybody in. So you're looking one side or the other of $2,000 for every town meeting. The other thing is that if you're in the midst of trying to offer bond anticipation notes and deal with DOR, anything that looks like turmoil at the local level makes lenders and others just a little bit nervous about the community. So we have laid out a proposal by which this body would pick a number that it's, I'm not going to say comfortable with, but you know you could meet it without having to cut the budget at all. And that number is what we had put forward originally, plus the 2.5%. plus what we've identified in the overlay that we could do without having to cut the budget whatsoever. If you want a higher number or a lower number, we need to know what that is. And then, once all the dust settles, this board would have to make final decisions on how to close that gap, that delta. You have seen the creativity of the fire chief as to how he would try to meet it. He's told you the risks associated in retention, retaining employees under that, but it's a little bit better picture than we thought we had the other night.
It's cutting hours, not positions.
It's cutting hours, not positions, making some other adjustments, understanding ahead of time inspections will be delayed and the like. So if you have warrant Article 1, you have your meeting of July 10 to decide if you're going to put forth a lower number, get that seconded, and try and get the meeting to do that. And you actually even have until July 10 or so to make a final decision on Article 2. One thing that we don't have a lot of time on is, notwithstanding they might not be the final budget cuts, we have proposed a cut in highway. We don't like it. That position is vacant, so we just don't fill it for now. We proposed some cuts in police. One of those positions is vacant, so we simply, we have someone on unpaid leave there, so we simply don't fill it at this point. But we have some other personnel measures we would need to start as soon as possible. Because if you keep spending money, and Jeff's been through this once before, if you have to save 70,000 and you have a year to save it over, that's one thing. But if it becomes 10 months, 9 months, 8 months, you gotta find more money, because you've been, you actually have to cut deeper. The fire chief's cuts on the senior center, I wanna be clear, the suggestion there was not that all the senior services would be delivered by volunteer. It does involve going from 36 hours a week of open hours to 30 hours a week. And I picked 30 because that's what the library's open. They'd both be open. It does involve the reduction of hours to the 2 staff people. We'd go down to the 1.5 people, which again is the same as we have in the library. I just try to kind of keep this in perspective. The Meals on Wheels program services roughly 9 people and costs $7,500 a year. If we had volunteer drivers, we could maintain that program. And the food pantry, we would need to involve more volunteers in. So we'd never propose the entire operation would be volunteer, that it would be closed, any of that kind of thing. But I do need to impress upon the board that the longer cuts are delayed, the deeper you have to go once you are.
Yeah.
So
And
they're
I wanted to make
they're
that
meeting
point 'cause I
tonight,
was-
and we talked this morning on this
Yep, I just
matter.
want, Carter, if I could interject one thing. I know that the advisory committee, Tony, thank you for being here this evening. The advisory committee took a look at your spreadsheet first, and I know that Mr. Springs was a little bit surprised about the total, and I think there was some back and forth about why, if we're only looking for, say, 3, why are you making $400,000 in cuts? For exactly that point, because the further that we wait, the bill to us just starts to balloon a little bit. So I think he's giving us an upper edge of what is possible. I would really, I'm not crossing my fingers or throwing salt over my shoulder, but I'm hoping that we get to, if we have to make cuts, I hope they're minimal cuts, so that we don't have to gut a lot of our services. But I wanted to make that point because I think in earnest, the advisory committee was looking to try and help that discussion as a further extension of the town looking at possibilities. But I think that higher number needed to be considered for just the fact that July 1's coming, and once we start to expend, the cuts become greater.
Well, the other thing is, for instance, if you cut the insurance and benefits, which is where we're talking about cutting $50,000, and you're cutting that by saying, okay, we are going to assume that the Medicare insurance that renews on January 1
Yep.
is not going up 6%, it's going up 0.34%.
Right.
Well, you get reimbursed a substantial portion of that by the light department, the water department, and the sewer department. So if you aren't gonna be billing that, you can't assume you're gonna pay out X, but get reimbursed by them at the higher number. So when you cut that insurance and benefits program by 50,000, you have to understand $27,000 of the estimated revenue, it's not gonna be there.
Mhm.
So cutting that number is not always exactly that number. You have to look at, as Jeff pointed out, if you cut the library to a given amount, you don't get the state grant.
Right, exactly.
You know, so
Yep.
you have to understand what's behind each number.
Right. I'm sorry, you can go, you can continue.
I mean, this is the best we can tell you as of today. We do have some concerns that the district is having conversations with the MSBA, as they should. But it wasn't until late this afternoon that we necessarily knew what part of that conversation was. And we just think that we need to be tuned into that, because it is the town of Templeton that's paying that debt. It would be nice to be part of that conversation.
Right. But
It's
I
a very
mean,
fluid
they have
situation.
They have two battles right now. They have the battle of the budget, and they have the battle that's tied to that of the configuration of the school district, which I know that they're working hard to try and figure out a path for it. I'd like to see I'd like to see them certify a lower number. I think everyone wants to see that, and I know how difficult that is. However, Dr. Casavant, it has some things that are concrete. Those two battles are tied together. And I think the one that you're talking about is if the MSBA looks at the usage of the school and their reconfiguration, I believe that that's tied to how the MSBA reimburses us for the cost of the school.
They have the ability, you built the school based upon a certain number of students and a certain grade grouping, and that using all of the classrooms.
Right.
If the use of the school does not fit those parameters, not because you have more students there, not because you have more classes there, but because you don't have the grades there that you said you would, and that results in empty classrooms, the MSBA has indicated that their options include that the unused classroom space may be subject to cost recovery, which means they would say, we gave you X dollars to construct this many square feet for this class configuration. If we'd known it was gonna be this class configuration, you only would have been eligible for this kind of reimbursement because you only would have built this much square footage.
Right.
That's not definitive, but at this point, that's about as close as they've
Well,
come
I mean, we
to weighing
need
in.
to see we have to be involved in that communication.
I believe that you do need to be a party to all of those communications.
And that therein lies the struggle that I know that they have to try and make the right configuration to work within the resources that they have. Anything else?
Our drop dead to get a warrant into the hands of the constable will be Tuesday morning. You can vote it tonight, you can meet in special session Monday night. If you vote it tonight, I can sit on it till the last minute, if that's agreeable with y'all.
For the
That
warrant.
should end up being part of any final motion.
For the warrant, you mean?
But yes, that's our drop dead. We must by law and by your local bylaw give 14 days notice. So if you go with July 18th, if you want something earlier, then I have to, those dates shift as well.
So July 2nd is the drop dead?
That morning is the drop dead.
And I know that you had, in addition to the cuts that you had talked about last week, you had some additional cuts. I just want to review those very quickly, one of which I know the advisory board was discussing. Eliminating the stipends that were just voted in for the Board of Selectmen, that's at $2,500. Eliminate the 7.5 increment to the town accountant for taking on the Hubbardston position.
Did they ask her?
I'm sorry, say that again?
I was just trying to, I didn't recall discussing the stipend, but one individual.
No,
did.
not the stipend, but the next one in this list was the Hubbardston position, or the intra-community agreement.
Intermunicipal agreement.
Yep. Eliminating $5,000 for timber cuts and take less from the advisory committee so that the reserve fund remains intact. Basically pushing that over.
Again, with the exception of if you find, with the manner in which we've approached it, you don't have to fix all of the cuts tonight or even Monday night.
Nope.
We've bought time until you know what the number is. I mean, you know, I mean, it's kind of hard to balance a budget when you have no clue what the numbers are.
And in
The
Article
only thing I'd
1,
point out is that we do have some personnel actions that we've identified, and the longer those are put off, if you found any of them, and I'm not gonna say agreeable, because I don't think there's a bloody cut that's been proposed by anybody that, you know, everybody would say, yeah, that's great. We always knew we didn't need that.
Yep.
But with the exception of highway where it's vacant, with the exception of the police officer where it's vacant, the other police personnel, the fire personnel, and the senior services personnel, if those changes, as they are delayed, we will have to go deeper in cuts as we get into the year.
Understood.
Would it be appropriate to ask, I had a citizen come to me and was wondering why we funded Prop 2.5 for the fire and EMT, and we're not upholding that, why there's cuts there. And I know you probably said it a million times, but maybe to just say it on TCTV. The question was, the question the person asked was, if we voted, was it 2 years ago for Prop 2.5? The last Prop 2.5 override had something to do with fire, police, and EMT, but why are we cutting that? Why doesn't, and I know you said that goes into general fund afterwards, like it comes for that year, but then the next year it goes into general fund? They're
Well,
losing their jobs.
unfortunately, in the very first year, the override is for exactly what folks vote. After that, it becomes part of the general budget. This body could take the position that, wait a minute, we just had an override for that. That's gonna be sacrosanct. Now, the chief, I think, has done a pretty good job at trying to figure out some workarounds here.
Yeah.
Just remember that 74,000 or 53,000 or whatever gets cut has to be cut someplace else.
And that you were saying the library can't because it loses its funding and its certification and.
The library has a $79,000 budget. It's open 30 hours a week.
Yeah.
If you cut that, the first thing that happens is you lose I think $12,000-15,000 grant from the state.
And if we lose our certification.
And then if your hours go down, you don't meet the minimum appropriation requirement, you don't meet the percentage of how much you have to spend on books and magazines and such, and you don't meet the minimum open hours requirement, not only do you lose the grant,
Yeah.
but then your people cannot go. You can't just say, well, they'll just go to Gardner.
No, they can't.
No,
I
they-
realized this a long time ago.
They can't. You are essentially persona non grata at any other public
I hope the
library
person that asked me the question
across
is
the
watching.
Commonwealth.
it's just awful.
Right now, you
So-
can go to any place. You can go to any public library in Massachusetts with your
Right.
Templeton
Right.
card.
I know
But
that.
once you fall below those levels, you cannot go to any public library. To borrow books, you can go in and read them there, or
Right.
use their research room.
So, I got
Thank you.
three things, as we're still going through the discussion for the school district and the general fund budget. We've got, Diane's over there tonight to, kind of act as the liaison, answer any questions and otherwise. I'd like to hear what, I'd like to get a report from her on what happens. Both Diane and Julie are not here tonight, but they did get copies of the proposed 2-article warrant. I didn't hear from them whether, if they were outraged or otherwise. I can tell you that the numbers the first Article 1 number makes sense to me because that's the number they certified. During that special town meeting, if we get another number that is not 6.9 million, and it's lower, that just makes it easier for us to be able to get to a more comfortable number. So if they came back with 6.8 or 6.5, because they did, someone made additional cuts or made recommendations to the school committee and the school district for a lower number, then that would make it easier for the town to get through this. Speaking on Article 2, that is the scenario by which we as a community would be able to make adjustments to our general fund operating budget to be able to proceed in a fiscally constrained environment, but able to proceed. Correct?
Without having to call a series of special town
Right.
meetings every time there was a district meeting.
Right.
Because if you
I
wait
do,
for district meetings, if I might, your bylaw, one, you have to have a warrant that's available open for 14 days. Then there's a 14-day period by law. So if you wait for every district meeting, depending upon how you do it, this time we opened a warrant 2 months in advance to try to, meet that requirement. But if you call a special town meeting each time there was a district meeting, you don't know if the budget's gonna pass, you're not prepared. So this is, to try to give this body the flexibility to deal with whatever eventuality comes its way.
So the lower ceiling in Article 2 in the language is 6.591, or 6.5 million, which is the number that we would like to see, so we're balanced.
That number is the 2.5% increase that you offered them, plus a cut in the overlay of $100,000.
Right.
So at that number, you don't actually have to cut the
That's
town
right.
budget at all.
Yeah.
So that's why I picked that as a baseline.
Right.
Thank you.
As it goes above that, for every dollar it goes above that, you have to cut the town budget.
Yep.
I
think that's key to understanding.
Assuming we continue with the thought process, except for some ambulance money the chief asked us to consider. We had spoken early on as we weren't gonna fix this by tinkering with the revenue estimates. We weren't gonna say, well, we'll make excise tax X and we'll do this and we'll do that. That's the path back to certain ruin, in my opinion. So that's how I got that
Yep.
base number.
I have a draft motion here. I'd like to address any kind of communication between the school district and the MSBA. I'd like to be able, for the town administrator to be able to request that communication so we can understand if there's going to be any potential reduction of the MSBA's cost share for the school. So I move that this board, as the owner of the Templeton Center Elementary School, the issuers of bonds for the construction thereof, and responsible party for all the statements contained in such offerings, and the responsible party for paying the costs thereof, that this board request the town administrator to seek all communications between the Narragansett Regional School District and the Massachusetts School Building Authority that have occurred within the past 60 days, and to inform both parties we wish to be copied on any and all future communications concerning the use of the building and any potential impact upon our reimbursements.
Will that come to us too? So we'll get it?
But we'll make you aware of them as they come in, yes.
And is that allowed to be shared with the voters, or is it just
It's all
us?
public record.
All public record?
Unless there's something that's not public record, yes.
Okay. Second?
Okay. So discussion, this authorization from the board allows Carter to be a part of that conversation. If there's a conversation out there where the MSBA is having communications about reducing the school reimbursement number, I'd like to be aware of that as a board.
And it's because rooms may not be used, is that what Carter was saying, that it was intended to be used for a certain,
Correct.
built to a certain specification, and if that's not met, they can reduce the amount they
That is-
contribute back to us?
That is correct. Any further discussion? On the motion to authorize the town administrator to be a part of that conversation from this board, how do you vote, Jeff?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. On the matter of the proposed town warrant, are we happy with the numbers contained in the articles, and that we're basically down 2 members, one of which who is acting, in full faith and as a liaison, at this very moment? Do we think that they would have anything additional to add to this discussion?
I don't know if they would, but I don't know if it's changed just the numbers there in front of us.
I don't
Because
think it would.
The first one is, that's from the school, I mean,
Yeah.
you can't change that anyway.
Yep.
And the other one is just, you never know what the school's good, like,
At that number
The top one?
or below,
Yeah.
you don't have to actually cut any of your line
The
items.
top number?
No.
Article 2.
The top
Article
number
2.
requires you cut a minimum of, roughly $400,000.
And we have to vote on both, we have to,
Well, yeah.
Well, if you want authority to cut the budget, you need to know, here's the school number, what's your number, so you can subtract the two, and that's the authority that you have to cut the budget. Town meeting is not gonna just let you cut the budget to 0. They're gonna wanna put some constraint on what your ability is.
but that top number is something that isn't that the top number, basically the number that the voters voted no on the 20th?
No.
No.
That top number is roughly
That's the school's budget.
$600,000 below
That,
um,
688, yeah.
the total. I'd have to look at the
Yeah.
split. I think our share was in the $7.3, $7.4 million range. So it is down about $500,000.
Is one,
As Margaret explained on their June 4th meeting, they described the cuts that they had made, and so their recertified number was 6.9. So that was a teacher, a grade 1 through 5. Yep. And so she explained that piece, that's that number, 6.9. So if we vote that this warrant be posted this evening, the articles, or, again, for those who wind up watching, and I'm told that we're getting some record numbers of people participating and watching, which is excellent. The first article
That's already known. Everyone understands the 6.9 number. The second article, it's 6.5 as a lower number. Again, still, the town administrator has made adjustments where we would not have to cut anything, but we still need to do work to be able to make the school district and the operating budget whole. But it allows us to be able to make decrements to that based on if 6.9 is passed and we don't have a lower number than 6.9. We want a number that's lower than 6.9, school committee, residents.
Oh, my goodness.
We want a number that's below, under 6.9, because any dollar over 6.5 goes into the proposed cuts, and that's where we have to figure it out.
But at the same time, if the state comes in and finds less, gives us lesser, is that gonna up the number? Would that up the number? So you said that if the state comes in, finds that rooms aren't being used, the school's not being used the way it should be, we're not gonna give you the
We have to
sum
borrow more money.
total.
We have to borrow more money because we have
Then
more
this
cuts.
budget is gonna go up.
So if you can follow the dominoes here, because first off, you can't conflate the reimbursement from the MSBA with the operating budget. They have,
Nothing to do with.
initially, they have nothing to do with each other.
Initially.
So
When do they?
now, let's say for a moment, you're anticipating X numbers of dollars from the state. The real problem becomes if they reduce that number and it requires that you borrow more than whatever was in the bond authorization, 24.7, 27.7, I can't remember. If they reduce their number, as long as you can still borrow everything within your authorization, you're all set. The difference is that for every extra dollar you have to borrow above and beyond where you want it to be, the taxpayers of Templeton have to make that debt payment. So you're authorized to borrow, I think it was $27 million. Jeff, do you remember the?
47 something.
Yeah, 27 points, yeah, something.
47, I thought he said.
So, I mean, you already have that
That's with
authority.
their money.
Oh,
That's
The
with the MSBA.
difference is, right now, you're headed for a lower number.
Can I ask another question? Does that, as a board of selectmen, our budget has to be settled. This is contingent upon the school. So are our hands tied if we don't make these warrants? We have to make these warrants,
You,
keep things moving forward for our budget as well?
you must, you don't have to do anything on your budget if you don't want. You could call a special town meeting for just the schools. But then, once that number finally settles, you're gonna have to call a special town meeting for the town budget. So what we're trying to do here is two articles. One, that approves a number for the school, or such lesser sum as may subsequently be certified. So once that domino lands, that ball in the roulette wheel lands, you know what the number is. With our second article, we're saying, and we'd like the selectmen to have the authority to reduce the town's budget in various departments as it deems appropriate, in an amount that's the difference between wherever that ball landed in the roulette wheel and a fixed number. And the fixed number we're suggesting is the 2.5% we offered them, plus what we can give them out of the overlay. And so let's say the school comes back at 6.5. Cross our fingers and let's just hope. And we have the new number here. You simply subtract the two, and then I come to you and say, okay, now it's time. You have to make these cuts. I just remind you that on the personnel side, if you keep waiting until September, October, November, December, you have to double down on those cuts
Right.
because you've been spending cash all along.
And so all the work that Carter has done to this point,
No,
these numbers are based on if we say we gotta do it now. So it's very, these numbers, these potential cuts to the operating budget are time sensitive, and I think that's the issue that we have to keep revisiting.
This is not a perfect approach, but it's the best approach the council and I can figure out that has some flexibility to deal with the fluidness of this. There are school districts that, in some instances, have not gotten their budgets till December. Quabbin, just, Hubbardston and those communities, a couple years ago was one of those.
Yeah, I think you had some communications with DOE about that, about schools that have not been successful in setting their budget.
Yes. I got the 3 that were in the last 10 years that the state came in.
Right, okay, so they went beyond,
They went to
They went all the way to the
December,
wall.
where the commissioner came in, they went the whole way.
yeah.
It was, Gateway, Gill and Montague. Gill Montague was in 2008. They didn't sound too friendly about it either,
Yeah.
from the documents I read, and one other one. But, and I spoke with them on the phone, trying to gather this information, and, they prefer it gets settled here without them coming in.
Right.
And like I said, I said, look, I'm newly elected selectman, I'm trying to gather this information, this is, oh yeah, Templeton, they know about us, they know this is happening. We prefer you to solve that locally rather than us come in.
Right.
And then I just said, I know there had been a couple, and they got me the names of the districts. And I said, I found Gill Montague, I found some documentation on that, and
Yeah.
and they did the whole circle thing. They put a thing together, talked about getting rid of the district and doing this and that, blah, 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 and the state don't look kindly on that, but they really don't wanna come in. They
Mhm.
really don't. I spoke to 2 different individuals, and we would like you to clear this up locally.
so that's the thing you took away from all your research was the state wants us to,
They
solve
don't wanna
this.
come here, and they don't wanna take over.
They
They
don't.
don't wanna get in the mess.
I would prefer
It's
not.
like having the DOR come into it. They don't wanna come here.
it's almost like calling DFS on yourself.
So it's,
Well, we
It
should
is
be able to
interesting.
do this. I think, that's why, that's why we have the school committee. That's why we have all these elected individuals to be able to make the decisions to get to this point.
And if I may,
Go ahead.
Step 1 is we need a warrant.
Yeah.
What your actual motions are going to be that night, we have some time on that. We can do that at the July 10th meeting.
Yep.
With that caveat that if you think you're really gonna have to cut the budget, and if you think personnel actions are gonna be part of that, the sooner you start those personnel actions. Bob was here, he can always delay buying some tires or buying this or buying that.
Right,
That's not
restructure his
great.
spend plan, right?
But personnel, that gets burnt every week they're on the payroll.
Yeah.
There's no way,
Yep.
you can't say to somebody, do you mind working?
Yeah.
And then if we have some money down the line, we'll send you a check.
Right. The 18th, you said that Derek was not available.
He is not available that
Can you
night.
just make it the 19th, or does that?
That's a
matter?
Friday night.
Oh, no.
We're outside of our window. The 18th is your drop dead.
Okay.
We'd have to move to the 15th in order for Derek to be
Okay.
available.
Is that a
we have to
Monday?
assume the 45-day clock is ticking. We have to assume, I believe, the number that we have currently certified, the 6,009,000, just, I just would assume the worst. The clock is ticking, it's
Yeah.
not gonna get reset,
Yeah.
so we do this, and then we have a little bit of time to work on the other stuff.
And if it gets recertified, clock starts again,
Then.
we get a little more time.
But
Right.
right now, I just assume that the clock is running,
Yeah.
and the big number is the number we're gonna deal with, and be ready to do that. And if it comes back, like it did at the district meeting in 13, where
Yeah.
it rolled back a little bit,
Yeah.
that was a good thing. It was less of an override.
Yeah.
But I just assume that the clock is running, and the big number on Article 1 is the number we're gonna deal with.
I agree with you.
And just start.
And if I would like to point out that the town has had 2 overrides in my memory of it. One was in 18, and the one before that was in 13. You had a request for an override in 15, I believe, but the town has not had
One every year.
override every year. I understand that may be, a painful memory for
Yeah.
some, but it's not a completely accurate memory.
Yeah, there was the loudest right around the election about overrides, and I think what's happening now is that we're getting a little bit of, as the tide comes back in to say, it's not as bad as you say it was. If one happens, it doesn't mean that it's been happening, successfully every single year. I think, Derek, I'm trying to think back in the last couple of elections, wasn't Cricket, Toth? She had run against Derek.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe she'd be available, because we have to elect
I
a moderator for
I
that.
leave that to the town meeting. She and I don't necessarily have the
All right.
closest, warmest
All right,
relationship.
Cricket.
It's town meeting to elect a temporary,
Okay,
like was done with Derek, he did it a few times.
but someone would make a floor motion. I
Yep.
mean,
Yeah,
we would, okay,
The town clerk make a motion.
If the moderator's there, he can appoint someone, as he does
yep,
with Carol when there's a conflict. But when the moderator isn't there at all, the clerk would open up the meeting and accept nominations
Okay.
for a moderator for that meeting.
all right. To get this warrant out the door, I'd like to make a motion for the special town meeting warrant to occur on July 18th, 2019. There is the standard language that you would expect on a warrant, but I'm gonna go ahead and read the 2 articles, so those watching will understand. And so the conversation can start, and so we don't have any miscommunications. So the motion that I'm making for the special town meeting warrant includes Article 1, the Narragansett Regional School District, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $6,978,408.00 to fund the town's assessed share of the cost of the Narragansett Regional School District for fiscal year 20, or such lesser amount as the district may subsequently certify, or to take any other action relating thereto. And Article 2, the FY 2019 General Fund Operating Budget, also known as OpEx, to see if the town will vote to A, amend its action under Article 26 of the 2019 Annual Town Meeting to further authorize the Board of Selectmen to make such reductions in such amounts and in such departments as it shall deem necessary and in the best interests of the community, in the amount by which the town's assessed share of the costs of the Narragansett Regional School District for fiscal year 20 shall exceed, if any, the sum of $6,591,514.00, and B, to transfer the additional sum of $20,000.00 to total in the aggregate the sum of $270,000.00, or to take any other action related thereto. I have a motion.
So moved.
Seconded. Jeff, are you a second?
Yes.
Yep, I moved. So we have a motion that's been seconded. Any further discussion on the special town meeting warrant?
Just that it also says that they will be posting attested copies thereof in each precinct, so if people don't get it the first time online, that they should be namely at the post office in Templeton, the post office in East Templeton, the office in Baldwinville, and at the town hall at 160 Patriots Road, East Templeton, 14 days at least before the time of holding said meeting. And in the Gardner News and published in said Worcester County.
I think it'll be indefinitely in some places where people have access to it. This is part of the public record for this meeting, so they can even see it that way. And I feel pretty confidently that Julie and Diane would feel the same time crunch. The numbers make sense. They're not dreamt up, or they didn't have any sinister genesis. So I feel good about that. Any further discussion? Anything? Okay. On the motion for the special town warrant for the July 18th annual special town meeting with both articles that I've read in their entirety, how do you vote, Jeff?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well.
Related question becomes, Mr. Chairman, shall I take any steps with respect to any of the proposed personnel actions? Or do you, given some of the positions are vacant currently, so we are getting some of those.
I think
savings,
it's in
or
our
shall
best
we wait
interest
until
to
July
not fill
10?
positions right now.
Yes, no, we're not gonna fill anything that's vacant.
You don't have, I mean, like, the selectmen aren't knocking on the clerk's door looking to get paid or anything, so that stipend and things like that are not gonna be placed into motion.
Right, and I've already
Um,
told Bob and the chief that we're not gonna fill the vacancies
Yeah.
at that point.
As far as the other recommendations for the board members that you've met with, I would say if they wanted to act in preparation for the worst, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think if it's affecting somebody negatively, they shouldn't do it. The department head should try and exercise some, what's the word I'm looking for? I think that they need to exercise some flexibility, but I don't think it's a bad thing if it's in the best interest of their department to actually make a cut or a reduction in hours or something like that, or not spend supply money. I think that
Right.
they should do that, and I think I think that that's a good thing.
So you're saying be proactive and start it ahead of time,
We're
just in
prudent.
case?
We're prudent, so the positions that are vacant, don't fill them until we
Right.
figure out,
But
because
not
it's just
cut
gonna get worse.
anybody.
So we will not take any of the personnel actions beyond leaving things vacant, but I will be telling the department heads, just understand that just because these haven't been triggered effective July 1, don't get feeling too comfortable.
Right.
And be prepared for the possibility of deeper cuts to make up for
That's correct.
post-July 1 expenditures, and we will we'll be circling back to you on July 11 when we have a clearer picture
Right.
of what, if anything, has changed.
So open
Okay.
up the conversation with the people in
Oh,
your
it's been pretty
department.
pretty open.
Yeah.
Don't hire, and be as prudent as possible. If you are aware of what you can cut or not, don't go out spending a bunch of money.
Right, and let people know what's on the table.
I didn't watch I know it's a meme to say this, but I never watched Game of Thrones, but to use that,
I've never watched.
but to use the phrase "winter is coming," so.
I mean, we'll be judicious in any of the appointments.
Yep.
We do have some vacancies that we will need to fill.
Yep.
But those that are being proposed for cuts, we'll keep an eye on everything.
Yep, no, I
Okay.
think that's a great thing. Okay, moving along, last new business, FY19 interdepartmental transfers. I
We
think
have
said
none as of this afternoon. And
Yep,
unless there's shoeboxes filled with bills that are gonna get dumped next week,
yeah,
it looks like we may make it through without needing any interdepartmental
okay.
transfers on July 10. The advisory committee did set a meeting for July 11. So if we do have any on July 10, we'll get those to the advisory July 11. I've already indicated to their chair I'll be happy to come to explain any of the interdepartmental transfers and to address questions on the warrant
Okay.
and where we're headed as well.
All right. I believe that Kelly used the term turn-ins. That is basically, I'm done with my budget. Here's the remainder.
Yep.
I think that was the language that you used.
Yep.
Okay.
And we'll be going through that. I mean, we still have another 15 days or
Yep.
so. Remember, we don't run an encumbrance accounting, we run a cash accounting. So we have all the June bills to come in yet, but it's looking good as of
Yeah.
3 o'clock this afternoon.
And I saw that the advisory board, did you get the copy of the May budget to actual? Okay. Moving into old business, we've already gone through the poll license hearing for Cook Road. I'm glad that we did that because I think Tom would hate me at this point if we had made him wait that long. Old business, we had under appointments, the Scout Hall Reuse Committee. There was a question from Jeff, Mr. Bennett, on, I think it had to do with past personnel. I know that there was research done and legal counsel.
My issue was, my issue that I brought up was, according to the ethics, you shouldn't, elected board or commission should not appoint its members to another committee or entity that you have oversight of. And it's, when you take the ethics test, it's one of the examples that they give.
So did you read the legal counsel?
I did.
Okay.
And I further went back and I watched the YouTube meeting, February 22nd, 2016 today, and I looked at those minutes, and the Scout Hall Reuse Committee was created by the Board of Selectmen rather than town meeting. There was no mission, direction, or anything like that. It was simply create a reuse committee, and there was that was February 22nd, and April 11th, 2016, Steve Castle came in and presented a plan or outline for possible for Scout Hall, and it's Selectman Haley Brooks made a motion to support the project moving forward and go to the Community Preservation Committee for possible funding and to put it on the warrant. I looked at the annual town meeting of May 14th, 2016, Article 13, for Community Preservation Committee funding, and the last part of the article, it has, and further to transfer $24,000 from Templeton Community Preservation Historic Preservation Account, $26,000 from the Templeton Community Preservation General Account for the Board of the Selectmen to expend for the historic preservation of the town-owned building 135 Patriots Road, known as Scout Hall. To me, that gives the power of the purse or oversight to the Board of Selectmen. So, and I read the legal opinion. I don't know the context of the question, how, what was asked and how it was asked, because sometimes if you ask a question this way, you get this answer. If you ask it another way, you may get that.
The question to legal counsel, you mean?
Town council.
Yes.
Okay, I understand what you're
Yes,
saying.
so I don't know in the context of how that question was asked. I don't know what the board, how they looked at that. I just know the information that I found. And for me personally, when I see that the Board of Selectmen requested, and this was submitted by the Board of Selectmen on behalf of the Community Preservation Committee to allocate these funds, because they're the ones who have the oversight to say if it meets the four requirements
Right.
that John talked
Well-
about. So where the money was going to be voted, and for the Board of Selectmen to expend, that gives me, my personal feeling is that the Board of Selectmen had financial oversight over that project, which means they do have oversight over
Yeah,
that
well,
committee.
what about capital planning? Like, the Board of Selectmen has a capital planning.
The exception to it is if the committee is created by town meeting. For instance, the Senior Oversight Committee was created. The Elementary School Building Committee was created. And if you look at the 2015 special town meeting in November, that $47 million that the town voted to authorize, it's to be spent, and I don't like this, but under the guidance of the Elementary School Building Committee. So $47 million of town money is to be spent under, the oversight of the Elementary School Building Committee, rather than the Board of Selectmen,
Yeah.
which doesn't, but you're dealing with the MSBA and the state, and it was
So
done.
you're uncomfortable putting anyone that has power of the purse, and however you connect that, for a sitting person on the select board, if the select board created the committee, any sitting person, you say shouldn't be on there.
That's,
Okay.
and I get that from when I read the ethics law, when I took the ethics test just recently, and the records that I was able to see. And I went and found the YouTube meeting so I could watch that, because to see, if there's anything in the minutes that wasn't included. Maybe they said something
Yep.
verbally that didn't, there's a summary of what happened, and, maybe they said, a sentence that's not in here. I watched it, and it matches the minutes.
Yeah.
So
I
am
look
not-
at it as, we're a board, we have, we can have our interpretation, we ask questions, we get determinations, and otherwise, I'm fine with that. The purpose of the Scout Hall Reuse Committee, it's right in the name, it's a committee of 3 people that gets together and they talk about problems, issues, ideas for the reutilization or the refurbishment of Scout Hall.
Yeah.
So it's not that we have to have a select person on there. Was it a good idea, or was Julie passionate about it? Probably. But if we're, comprised as a board, if we voted on this tonight, she'd have to recuse herself anyway, right?
Is that Diane or Julie?
No, it's Julie.
Julie Richards,
Julie.
Selectman Richards, yeah.
Would she would have to abstain?
Not necessarily, because
It's like
there's no
voting yourself for
remuneration.
chairman.
This turns on the definition of the word supervision. So if you create a committee which you don't have supervision over, as established in the court case and in the ethics commission, I have to respectfully suggest, town council suggests, there is not an issue. The complexity here that Jeff brings out is that the select board was the authorized party to expend the money. Does that constitute supervision? So the question that town council was asked didn't have that very specific element to it. So you have 2 things you can do. You can not make the appointment, and Jeff very well may be right, or you can add that information to the inquiry that goes to town council and ask them to revisit the issue. But I do want to be clear, if the money issue was not involved, I don't think there'd be any question, based upon the rulings that have been issued, that the board does not have supervision over the committee.
I just think.
But
our
the intent
projects-
of this committee is for the reuse of Scout Hall as it goes through its different phases of refurbishment.
Yes, and they do spend real money. This body's delegated all that, they haven't, but Jeff is correct that the committee does spend real money.
I just think for these going forward in the future, when we're gonna have something like, and this isn't just like well, maybe we have suggestions to like improve the common, but if you're looking at something like this to rehab it or redo it, and it's gonna involve money, just have town
Yeah.
meeting, create the committee, report back in a year or 2 years, and.
I agree with
and
you.
come
I
up with
was
a
thinking the
mission
same
and
thing.
you know,
It's not like the selectmen can't interact
Right.
with that committee, especially if they're coming back to give a report or suggestion or recommendation.
Right, it's just, then you get away from all this stuff.
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah.
that's just my 2 cents on it.
And it was it 2 years that they couldn't serve?
No, it's, if you, like John Capel's got off the, it's
Yeah.
30-day wait,
Oh,
and then you
30
can
day.
get, before
Yeah.
you can get appointed to something.
So we need somebody else. I think that Julie can still interact, but as far as.
I mean, that's just me personally, the rest of the board can vote however they see fit, I'm just speaking for me. And making the
well-
board aware of the past
All right,
actions.
Can we move to wait out the 30 days for John?
we're beyond that.
No, that's,
Beyond-
he's over
that's
his
done.
30 days.
Yeah.
This
Okay,
is
so
a
he's
totally
good.
different issue.
I move to appoint Julie Richard, John Caplis, and Steve Castle to a term, to the Scout Hall Reuse Committee, to a term ending June 30th, 2020. There is a motion, do I have a second? Not hearing a second, that motion did not carry. We'll have to, I don't know what the rules for reconsideration. Yeah, I'm just gonna, I wanna have more discussion on it. How often does Scout Hall Reuse Committee meeting? Is that a monthly? As needed? Ad hoc?
As
Ad hoc?
needed,
Okay.
as needed.
All right, for future agenda. That takes care of new business and old business. Is there a necessity for executive session this
I do
evening?
not have anything
Okay.
tonight, Mr. Chairman.
I'll order it to board and staff member comments or reports.
The other thing was,
Did I
the
miss something?
the Veterans Advisory Board.
We have research we need to finish doing on that, we just
Yep.
didn't have the time.
Okay.
I have one.
So we're tabling that.
Is this-
Terry, absolutely.
Okay.
You have the floor.
Thank you. I'd like to take this time to thank and congratulate our veterans on their groundbreaking ceremony this past Saturday, June 22nd, at 4 Elm Street, Baldwinville, Mass. Sheila Pelletier, her husband, John Caplis, Jim Brio, Mike, I'm sorry, I'm not, Uvard, Brock, the Community Preservation Committee, the Conservation Committee, TCTV, I enjoyed watching and hearing the speeches and the whole thing on TCTV, on the day of the GI Bill, according to Jim Brio, and the many unnamed heroes bringing this vision to fruition, leaving a legacy for generations to come here in Templeton. Descended into Hell has taken on a whole new meaning for some of our veteran men and women and their families. So, thank you.
It was excellent. I wish I could have been there. That's a great thing for the veterans and towns. Thank you for that. Jeff, do you have anything?
Yes. I went to down to the MRPC building, and I went to the MPO meeting. I put one of each of these in all selectmen's boxes, so you can read up on what's going there. It has to do with there's the MPO, the MRPC, and the MJTC. And they're gonna meet again on July 10th, the 11th, and the afternoon of the 18th. So it'll be a fun day. My biggest takeaway from that meeting, my first meeting, Bob Sozak didn't go. He was in some classes. And this just has to, just to make the board aware of, like, Royalston Road, when you get in there, when you get on this, involved in the state and planning these things. Apparently Ashburnham had got the Route 101 on the tip list. It's in South Ashburnham. If you get off 140 and head down, when you get to the Gardner line, you go down a big steep hill.
Yep.
And that road is crumbling. At the bottom of that is an old railroad bed, and they wanted to do what a lot of places are doing with the railroad tracks tore up, to make it a bike
Rails for
path and
trails,
trail.
yeah.
But the thing they didn't do that from the get-go. They got on the tip list, the project was scheduled to be moving forward to happen in 2021. Someone got the idea, well, while we're doing that, we'll get some paving done on the trail. They didn't have a plan, and the state is really, if you don't have the plan out there, you don't go to the men's room. So they got bumped to 2024.
Oh, wow.
And there was a representative who was from Ashburnham who was on the MPO board, and he said, he made the point, well, we can't wait, that road is crumbling. We need to stay on, and he asked, can we roll back if we hurry up and come up with a plan, or if we drop that railroad thing, that bike path right off the list, if we just stick with the original? And the answer was no. When you got bumped, somebody got slid into place.
That's right.
And it's closed. So just for us to be aware of, if, like the Royalston Road, if you have plans, you have to make up a step, A, B, C, D, and stick with it. Otherwise, you can end up like that. Now, I know I've talked with Adam and Bob that have gone, and there is a chance that if, say, somebody didn't get filled in for that slot, that Ashburnham might have been able to roll back and move up, which is maybe the case, with Royalston Road, since it's out there 24, 25. There's a chance, there's always a chance that some project would drop off or not happen and we could move up. But my takeaway was, if you get on that and you have a schedule, dot the i's, cross the t's, and don't change midstream, because you will get spanked.
Right.
So like I said, I will be going to the MPO meeting, the MRPC meeting. MRPC town resident Glenn Eaton is on there, and I did speak with him for a few minutes.
Glenn
who I
Eaton.
met there. So they have meetings with the MPO, which is the tip list, MRPC, and there is a $347,000 in brownfield grant money available to, like, if you had access to the old Temple Stewart property and you wanna, you gotta do a little cleanup with it, you can apply for that grant money. And then there is the the MJTC, I'll learn these acronyms here shortly. And they meet in July, all three organizations, July 10th, the 11th, and MPO is the 18th, 1 to 2, I think, something like that. So, like I said, I
Jeff,
gave.
you mentioned that out of out of the MPRC, that the rotary for, that connects south and
Right out here.
yeah,
And
that's been
That's
approved, and
on
that's
for
gonna-
2021 or 2, maybe like
22.
22.
And that's where basically the state comes in, works on that. Okay.
Yeah, their plan is to make a rotary out right there to that funky intersection.
Yeah.
It's.
I think everybody
it
in
can't
town
be a
has
four-way stop
experienced
because of.
different emotions when going through that,
Yeah. Somewhere at one time in the Board of Selectmen's office, and it may have ended up downstairs when we moved, there was a binder with the plans and the design, and it was the first time I looked at it, like somebody's out of their tree.
Yeah.
But it's I think you can find it on MRPC's website.
Okay.
But that's where I
For a
found out
listing
the
of,
year that it's, like I said, it's always possible for the project to move up, but if you make a boo-boo,
Yeah.
you could get rolled
Yeah.
back, so.
And just to piggyback off that, talking about Templeton's road infrastructure, there is, Our fight right now is to get open our school, fund everything, get into this, the fiscal year 20. But I know that people are concerned about the roads. We definitely have a difficult situation with our Chapter 90 money, but we are looking at that. There's a road study out there. I urge that people go onto our website and be familiar with that road study before coming in and making suggestions on that stuff. It really does pay, as we saw earlier this evening with some of the public comments. You've got to be informed, and in order to make a good decision and cast a correct vote that you feel good about, you've got to be informed about some of this stuff. I know that people can't make it into the meetings. I know that social media can be a dismal fight sometimes, but our website, we do a good job of putting the information out there so that the citizens in town can see the road studies, they can see past votes, they can see Board of Health concerns. The weekly reports are very useful. So thanks for the update.
Just one other thing, if I may. The work of the EMD director, Rich Curtis.
Yes.
We are, a lot of work from the highway and others, but he's the lead on it. Templeton received a reimbursement from FEMA in the amount of $29,000.
29 and change. It'll be in this week's weekly
for
report.
from a snowstorm back in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you get for that. This year it was $1,750. So that extra $750 that was questioned, you got a $29,000 return on it. Myself personally, you're speaking on the roads and money, I would like to see the town create a couple more stabilization funds. So when a check like that comes in, you could put it in there and use it towards the snow and ice deficit that you know you're probably gonna have year to year.
Yeah.
And rather than funnel some of the free cash to cover that, because you have to pay that debt.
Yeah.
Create a fourth stabilization fund where you would put money aside designated strictly for the roads.
Okay.
Because we have to, Chapter 90 money is not gonna cover it. You can't count on the state. I think in 15 or 16, they went up to 300 million, but they've been at 200 million for a lot of years. Besides, aside from the fact that the governor likes to say, well, in my term, I will have been governor of, $1 billion, it's 200 million a year, and it's not, the estimate, I think, is like 600 million a year just to maintain the roads.
Yeah.
And cities and towns, I think, are responsible for over 70% of the roads in the state.
Well, when Governor Baker watches this meeting, he's gonna be a little upset that you're blaming him for the schools and the roads.
I hope he is. He can come and talk to the board face to face.
I would enjoy that. Any other board or staff
There
member
was
comments?
just a question on FEMA reimbursements, instead of going back to the general fund, should go back to the department they came from. And
Yeah,
he's saying set up a stabilization
I
fund.
think we should take a look at that. I think we can
So
add
there
that
is
to a
a-
future meeting, yeah. But again, I'm looking at that near-term project, the crisis that we've got going on. Carter, yes?
Just real quick follow-ups on the brownfield money. We did submit a inquiry to MRPC about a week ago. We don't have any response yet. We'll follow up next week again with the hope that we could get some dollars on the American Tissue Temple Stewart, because we want to move them through the tax title process, and we can't do that until we've been able to narrow the potential risks on there. On the roads, we do want people to know that there is about $600,000 worth of road work out to bid right now. Once we get those bids, we'll hopefully have a better handle on where we are on Orchard Lane. We did also just get the reinspection report on the Main Street Bridge by Seaman Paper.
Yep.
So we really want to get that reopened as much as possible So that would have to be Chapter 90 monies as well. But we do have $600,000 worth of road work out. Watch where that lands. On the schools, Jeff's very correct, and we've said this before. If the state simply funded the transportation budget as they told us they would, that's about $700,000. So if we had 700 Templeton residents emailing, writing, or calling Senator Goby and Representative Whips, that would add a lot more voices than this body's voice when you had those folks in front of you in January. And finally, on the longer term, it'll be in your weekly. You asked me to explore developing a class of folks to potentially sue the state, some other activities. I spent a substantial amount of time talking with Maureen Marshall, the executive director of the Massachusetts Association of Regional Schools, earlier this week. And I think where we're headed is a one-day summit in September, all-day Saturday, of all regional schools. This is just brainstorming.
Yep.
The member towns, the finance committees, councils for the member towns, councils for the regional schools, to talk about three elements. One, political. There's the legislation that would tip the share between the localities and the state back in our favor. Senator Lewis's legislation. There's the funding formula being looked at again.
Yep.
Supposedly that'll get voted on this fall. So an early September summit, think of the network movie, if we're mad as hell and we don't want to take it anymore.
Right. Yep.
The second piece of that would be potential litigation. And the third piece is the need for regional schools to reinvent themselves. I mean, we have all these districts that have 12, 13, 800, 900, 1,800 kids. You cannot support all the administrative structure. The state and the
Right.
regionals have got to look at some real wholesale changes.
Not
None
for-
of which anyone's gonna wanna give any ground on. So, we've got the budget we're working on, and we've got these longer terms. And she will meet with her board in mid-July, and then she and I will circle back to each
Okay.
other. I think she was surprised to get a call from a town. So we wanted to
Yep.
update you and the community on that. And
Okay.
I'm quite serious, 700 letters on school transportation will go a lot farther than the conversation you were able to.
I agree, or, taking pictures of potholes and putting it on Facebook, it may be, send those pictures to us or the DPW, and, if you identify where that hole is, and you hold up an apple to it or whatever to show size, tell us where it is so we can go address that. We don't drive the roads every single day to check status. So if you report in on a hole like that, we'll come and take care of it. And that hot box, probably should have asked Bob earlier when he was here. I don't know.
So we have bid out, as part of the $600,000
Yep.
in roads, we've also bid out the supply of material.
Okay.
Okay? Once we award those contracts, then we can process the Chapter 90. We've started that
Yeah.
process.
Well, how about the
Because-
capital item? Because that hot box was part of the,
But it's being bought in part with Chapter 90 money.
got it?
So you have to have workforce work that you're doing. So that's the supplies being bid under Chapter 90. Then we can go and say, see, we're buying X number of tons of material with Chapter 90 money to do more than 500 feet of road. And one of the tools that our workforce needs to do that work is this hot box. So now the hot box is eligible for the Chapter 90 money.
Okay.
Because we're using about 20,000 of town and about 10,000 of Chapter 90 to buy that.
I do recall the spreadsheet, yep.
Hey, the city of Gardner bought a hot box with Chapter 90 money, and they saved enough from coal patching materials to pay for a second one.
Yeah. Yeah.
to go out and take care of, you know, the potholes and other stuff that happens, especially in the spring, so.
I've been touting it, you know, for a couple of months now, ever since we had, you know, had finalized that. It's gonna be a good thing. Once we can get out there and utilize it, I
Yep.
think it's gonna,
And we're gonna be using that on many of the repairs we're gonna be doing this
Yep.
summer. We will
Polly,
have the
anything?
page from the warrant that we'll ask you to sign
Got
before
it.
you leave.
Polly, anything? Adam? Okay, entertain a motion to adjourn.
They get to sign the
Second.
signature page, and we can make the corrections with it.
Okay, all in favor of adjourning? Say aye. Aye. We're out.
Okay.